Well, I'm finally back doing these reviews after a month break because it's taken me so long to play and review The Last of Us. But hopefully it'll be worth it. So where to begin? Well, The Last of Us takes place in the United States, 20 years after a spore-based infection called cordyceps rapidly spread across the globe, wiping out a vast majority of the population by warping its host brains, turning them into deadly predators capable of killing with a single bite. If you want to know more, watch David Attenborough's Planet Earth. That's where the developers got the idea from. And it has reduced the majority of the world's population to either struggling survivors or ravenous infected. Once a loving father and now an aging survivor, working as a smuggler in one of America's few safe havens. Your goal as Joel in The Last of Us is to leave the safety of the quarantine zone in Boston and transport a young girl named Ellie across America, so a secretive group called Fireflies can utilize her immunity to the infection in the hope of saving humanity from the brink of extinction. The first thing you notice after playing The Last of Us is that Joel is not your typical hero like the Nathan Drake we've become accustomed to in Naughty Dog games. And despite this, no matter how brutal he becomes, you are constantly rooting for him, because you know that he's slightly less savage than the people he kills. Joel's behaviour develops over the year he spends with Ellie, and his relationship with her ultimately borders on the obsessive. Ellie is of course the star of the show, but she is just as reliant on Joel as he is of her. As her parents left her at a young age, she has no father figure in her life. But she is also full of questions and wonder, often communicated through the many contextual conversations she and Joel share. She'll pick through records at a music store, become fascinated with wildlife she's never seen before, and ask a million questions about the past. You watch her learn, grow and gain meaning. It's impossible not to become attached to her, a true testament to the work Naughty Dog has put into character development. I think she is certainly up there with Lara Croft, Faith, Bayonetta, etc. as one of the best video game heroines. I don't think I could possibly criticise the presentation by Naughty Dog of this ravaged world and its inhabitants. The graphics are as good as they could possibly get this generation, textures are very detailed and individual leaves blow in the wind in overgrown settlements. The character models look great in game and even impeccable during cutscenes. The overall sound and lighting is superb, raising the tension and the apocalyptic atmosphere. It's probably the most realistic game I've ever played in terms of dialogue and voice acting. I didn't think it was possible in a game for the writing and acting to be so good that every single spoken word is so believable, raising the bar through the roof that I thought Bioshock Infinite had set so back in March. Each environment is unique, thoughtfully crafted and bursting with little details, including notes, letters, voice recorders and more that tell desperate stories of survivors you'll rarely ever meet in person. The gameplay could be considered the game's weakest point, and how you experience it during your playthrough of The Last of Us will most likely decide what you ultimately think of it. But before I continue, let's remind ourselves that although Naughty Dog's previous third-person shooters, the excellent Uncharted series, are great examples of how adventure games should be done, the combat featured in them was really nothing more than a polished shooting experience. So with that in mind, would you expect the combat in The Last of Us to be one of the most riveting and intense experiences that any game has to offer? Granted, the tension only really racks up to 11 on hard difficulty or higher, but the average player will most likely find normal difficulty more than enough for challenge, as I know I certainly did, racking up a few dozen deaths in the process. But the days of clambering up train or cliffside with Nathan Drake are over, as if most, if not all, platforming sections in The Last of Us have been replaced by quite repetitive pushing, lifting and scrambling of ledges and ladders, rafts, trolleys, carts and especially dumpsters. You name it and Joel will move it, but regardless of how many times you have to do this, it never gets boring because there is always interaction and interesting dialogue between the characters, and these sections also let you take a break from the intensity of the combat, as you know for the time being at least you are safe from the infected world. Stealth features in a big way in The Last of Us and forms most of the intensity associated with the game. Now the zombie genre doesn't usually associate itself with stealth gameplay, as seen in the biggest titles like Call of Duty Zombies, Left 4 Dead, Dead Rising and Dead Island, that like to promote a bigger the gun the harder they fall attitude. And this is perfectly fine, as mowing down and ending hordes of the undead can be fun. When you first meet the people, suffering from the first and second stages of the infection called runners and stalkers respectively, in the abandoned remnants of the USA, you will most likely have an urge to whip out your revolver and pop a few infected caps, without realising that not only that they don't go down easy, sometimes 3 shots to the chest and 1 to the head, although when on normal or above, auto-aiming is disabled, as it is incredibly difficult to nail a headshot in the early game, especially when they come at you in packs of 3 or 4. But you also realise how scarce ammunition really is in the game. Even if you search every building and compartment in an area, you will typically only break even in your ammo reserves from the previous firefight. This is why stealth is such an important aspect of the game, creating tension but also offering you rewards for doing so in the form of conserving ammo, medkits and even a clean bill of health. Even still, being stealthy in an area with any of the stage 3 monstrosities, known simply as clickers, where the infection has spread so far for so long that the host is completely blind now, and uses echolocation as a series of ominous and frankly disturbing clicks, hence the name, to find its prey, which is often new. It's particularly difficult and still requires the resources to make the shivs that are only weapon and that can stealthily kill clickers effectively. At the very least, downing a clicker without having your neck ripped open requires a well-placed brick to the brain followed by a brutal melee attack. Alternatively, you can go loud and aim for the head, but their erratic movements make this surprisingly difficult without the aid of a shotgun to provide that much needed spread. Despite being easy to down, the stalkers I mentioned before terrified me the most, because not only do they actively hunt you, they are also near impossible to stealth kill, often running at full pelt towards me as soon as I try to sneak up on them, which is why I was glad they rarely appear in the game, although I was disappointed that they don't actually stalk you. As I mentioned before, it's more of a hunt, they perform collectively in packs. The fourth stage of the infective is a bulging mass of infection that renders all human features on the host unrecognisable. They are called bloaters and have a tendency to spurt disgusting toxic substances from their bodies in your direction, and are particularly a brute when it comes to damage resistance. Best dealt with a large supply of Molotovs and nail bombs. The infected AI is not particularly smart when out of combat, as they often stand still twiddling their rotten thumbs waiting for me to shiv them in the neck. And during combat the AI is only slightly better, so they don't only target you, so you have to be aware that survivors in your group don't get overwhelmed, but the AI is capable and can make for a challenge in harder difficulties. Fighting the hunters you often encounter is as emotionally taxing as it is physically dangerous, because the people Joel fights are, like him, just normal folks trying to survive. They have similar AI patterns to the infected and will follow large but linear paths. I notice they will also move up if their comrades have been downed or they receive no contact with them for a certain amount of time, meaning you have to act fast before their friends arrive in your vicinity when you are eliminating a group silently. You will notice this in the infected too on occasion if you find large groups of runners, but unlike your human adversaries, who often work together, audibly communicate, plan their actions and practice self-preservation, their infected attack without concern for anyone's safety, and their only goal is to spread the infection. Quick time events are also prominent in this game and are key to Joel and Ellie's survival, whether that be casually pressing triangle to open a garage door or frantically mashing square to pry a horrible clicker from your face. There is also a crafting inventory system, similar to the brilliantly rebooted Tomb Raider, although this goes much more in depth, featuring elements of an RPG with the skill pills that you can pick up, upgrading using spare parts. You also have to plan what weapons and equipment you'll have to fight before a fight, as there is a lengthy period between switching weapons and using equipment if you don't have your holster upgraded or any skills gained yet. Items not only realistically reflect the requirements but also apply to a multitude of different equipment. So if I wanted a Molotov cocktail, I would have to sacrifice the same resources needed to make a possibly more important medkit, proving the importance of planning your battles wisely. My favourite part of the gameplay experience in The Last of Us was how Naughty Dog has managed to inject such fluidity into the transitions between easily the best cutscenes since Metal Gear Solid 4 and the thrilling gameplay. Best example of this being when you are ambushed in Pittsburgh and the current cutscene, one of my favourites, doesn't end as the gameplay begins, giving an enhanced sense of interaction to that scene. There are two multiplayer modes called Supply Raid and Survivors featured in Factions, where you have 12 weeks to grow your faction and survive as either the Fireflies or the Hunters. They have brilliantly taken the tension from the single player and added it into the multiplayer whilst replacing the competent AI with usually intelligent online players. What's especially neat about The Last of Us Online functionality is the metagame that transcends everything you do. When playing online, your character, who is fully customizable in both appearance and loadout, is the leader of a band of survivors, successfully navigating online matches, collecting items and engaging in one-off challenges called missions helps grow your band. Of course, if you fail, your band decreases in size. It's a simple system in premise, but it's undeniably addicting when you start getting into it. It creates another higher level, a different way to gauge your overall success by something other than wins or losses, and your kill to death ratio. Like the single player campaign, which judges your actions based on future consequences, so does multiplayer in The Last of Us. Reward or detracts based upon performances at the time you may not seem entirely consequential. The Last of Us seamlessly blends the finest cinematic cutscenes the gaming industry has to offer, with breathtakingly tense gameplay, and backs it up with the most riveting and emotionally resonant story, and the most incredibly realistic dialogue and voice acting. Yes, it has its critics, like everything does, but regardless of some questionable AI and a few bugs, I can assure you that this game definitely isn't overrated. But it's not perfect, for that matter. This game, along with the original Dead Space, are the too few games that I've actually found difficult to play through. Not difficult in the sense that I wanted to stop playing, but more in the fact that it seemed as though there was no hope, no reprieve. This game is simply a masterpiece, so I'm going to give The Last of Us a near-perfect 9.5 out of 10. The Last of Us is not only a surefire contender for Game of the Year, and now PS3's best exclusive, but I am certain people will look upon this masterpiece favourably for decades to come. With a season pass worth of DLC to come, an enjoyable multiplayer and on top of the brilliant single player campaign, I would certainly recommend that you buy The Last of Us right away if you happen to own a PS3. So that's it for today's episode of Should You Buy. Be sure to like the video if you found this review helpful in any way, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of this series. Hopefully next time we'll be reviewing Payday 2, which promises a lot of changes and improvements from the original, so look forward to that. But for now, have a nice day and goodbye.